Hello everyone, welcome back to Path for Cloud. So in today's video, we will discuss the taints and toleration in Kubernetes. It is also one of the important concept, right, where you can control your pods which is running in your cluster, right? And this is not only from the that perspective, from the exam perspective also, I have oftenly seen that this kind of exam question will be asked in the CKA exam, right? Because CKA exam is purely based on the labs, right? No worries, we will discuss the exam thing as well later in this course. But today, let's focus on the taint and toleration, right? So to understand the taint and toleration, right? First, let me recap like what we have discussed so far. Okay, where is the notepad file? Here it is. Okay, so we have seen that under scheduling, right? What we have discussed the namespaces, right? Namespaces is something which is a like kind of isolated environment, right? Where you can run your own dedicated stuff, right? Which might don't know what is happening outside of that namespace, right? Until unless you will not explicitly allow that. So that's what the namespace is, right? Where we have seen the restrictions as well, like you can put the restrictions where you will be allowed only to some number of resources which you can deploy in that particular namespaces, right? That was the kind of at the namespace level, like you can put a restriction. Then we have seen the compute restrictions, right, for the pod itself. In last video, we have discussed requests and limit for a pod, right, where you can set the kind of values, right, like this much of compute you can request and you can go up to that much of limit whatever you are specifying, right? Where request is just the minimum and the limit is the maximum that we have seen already, right? So now before we start the scheduling, right, so taint and toleration, right, before we start this, let me set the agenda, right? So far what we are doing is like we are, let's say if I go to this pod.yaml file, right? So here what we are doing, we are just setting that, okay, I need to deploy some pod, right? And that particular API server will ask scheduler to schedule that pod, right? Now you need a additional resource for your pod, let's say service, right? Let me open in another window. This is service, right? So here what is happening is we are deploying a two object. On the left hand you can see we have the pod.yaml which is deploying a pod called web1, right, which is using that image. On the right hand side we are creating a service called web1 hyphen service, right? This is the namespace we have. Now how come a service knows, okay, I need to link that particular pod, right? I need to expose that pod on that particular no port or maybe IPs, right? Here comes picture in something called label and selectors, right? This is called label and selector, right, which we have already seen. So these are the label, right? And here what is happening is we are putting some kind of additional tag on that particular resource so that another resource which want to communicate to it so that it can filter out those tags and it can directly, right? Because if you directly say, right, I just want to deploy one pod, right? Maybe there are hundreds of pod which is already running, right? But how service will know for which pod I need to expose? For that we put a something called nginx web. You can put any, you can give any key value here, right? There is no restrictions, right? But just to be good practice, we put something called app equal to this or maybe environment of that particular pod, right? So these are some best practices we put as a label, right? So these labels, right? So here I am saying a selector. You need to select what? You need to select a label called app which has a value nginx hyphen web. So that now service knows, okay, I need to expose this guy, right? That's how that it is doing, right? Let's quickly go to our CKA lab. This is my cluster. What I have done is I have added one more node here, right? And as of now it is running on that cloud, right? I was doing some other demo, so I thought let's use the same setup to explain this, right? I'm not running my environment today in my local lab, it is on Azure cloud. Anyways, let's continue. So here you can see that what we have is this. right? If I directly go kubectl create hyphen f02, so it will gonna create my pod and it can be land to any of the node, right? Let's see where it has landed. It has landed on Kubernetes 2, Kubernetes node 2. Fine. Now it is the scheduler, right? Which want that scheduler, okay, go and deploy that particular node on this, right? But is there any way like we can instruct a scheduler, right? Or we can instruct a Kubernetes, okay, go and deploy that particular pod on a particular node, right? That's what the topic for today is told, taint and toleration, right? I'm just setting an agenda, right? So that it will be clear for us to understand this topic, right? Yes, there is a way you can do. Even you can bypass the scheduler, right? Let me show you. I have a file called direct pod, right? So here you can see as of now nothing, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm just introduce a new property called, which is something called node name, okay? And I would say Kubernetes 8 node 1. Fine. I'm just gonna save it and let's confirm it is there, right? Node name. Before I create this, let me describe the current running pod. Kubectl describe pod web1 and I'm just gonna mm, describe pod 1, right? It is a node name only, right? Let me see 1 second, guys. It is yeah, it is node name, but let me see if I can just grab the full name. That's a little weird. Let me describe full. Describe pod web1. Okay, there is space. And if I scroll up somewhere, it should be node name because it should show that okay where it is exactly running, right? That's what that I just wanted to show, but it is not showing me. Okay, node selector because it is using that. Okay, now I got it. What is happening? Let me quickly run this because that way it is. We will discuss more when we discuss imperative and declarative. What is the difference between the create and the apply? Kubectl create and kubectl apply, right? As of now, forget about that, what we have done. But let me quickly create another pod called Nginx. Fine. Now, if I'm gonna describe this pod Nginx, uh, okay, there is a typo, INX. So if I scroll up, so now it should show where it is running. Initialize pod scheduled node name. Where is node name? Node selector, nothing. Okay, I'm not sure why it is not showing, but why I wanted to show you like when we are doing this, right? Kubectl uh, get pods hyphen o wide, right? So it is showing this information, right? Like this node is coming somewhere, right? So I'm not sure why it is not coming. Let me give one more try. Nginx pipe grep hyphen node. Okay, it is node, not node name. Fine. Now we are good, right? So I was looking for a different keyword, but it is node only. Okay. And it should show for this web one as well. If I say node, so here also it is showing Kubernetes node 2, right? And this is the IP of that particular node. Fine. So now this is something that it is a scheduler, right? Who is scheduling these things, right? But can we just describe, okay, go and deploy my particular pod on this node, right? So for that, not this one, we have file called direct pod YAML where I'm saying, okay, go and deploy this pod on Kubernetes node 1, right? Before that, let me delete the web1 pod, because as of now, if you see, it is running where? It is running on something called Kubernetes node 2, right? Web1. So let me quickly delete pod web1. It is deleted now. Let's create cube kubectl create hyphen f, and I'm gonna pass this file. Now if I'll do this, it again deleted. Sorry, let me create it again. And I was looking for this command. Yes. So now you can see that it has explicitly scheduled on Kubernetes node 1, right? If I change the name of this pod, right? Let's say 2, and again if I apply the same thing, you can see web 2 is also on Kubernetes node 1. But let me do one thing. Let me delete this node part. Okay, let's save it. And now let me change the name as well. Here I will say web 3. Let's save and create it again. Now let's see what is happening to the pod. So now you can see that Web3 where we are not explicitly saying, okay, deploy it, right? Because here scheduler will come in picture. Scheduler found, okay, there are already 3 pod running on Kubernetes node 1 and node 2 is sitting idle, right? So let's deploy this particular pod on node 2. So instead of deploying on node 1, it has deployed on node 2, right? But now if I go again to this file, and this time again if I'll set that particular thing, right? Let's say it is web 4, and if I gonna apply it again, and if you see now, it is again went to node 2, right? So scheduler always tries to kind of balance the workload between your node, right? Until unless you have not specified something, right? So it will always try to balance the workload, right? But if you want to bypass the scheduler, right, like you want to give instruction to API server, okay, I know that where my pod should be running. So what you can do is you can simply go and you can define that particular. Let's say if I am gonna deploy this 5, right? Now there is a one thing which might you feel that I am contradicting, but let me do one thing first and then we will discuss that, okay? Now I am saying K8 master node. I am saying, okay, deploy a particular pod, right, on where? Master node. Kubectl create hyphen f 13. V1 cannot be handled as a pod. Okay, there is some typo probably. Node name, right? Now let's create it. It has created, right? Now let's list. Let's see if our pod is scheduled or not. And indeed it is scheduled on master node, right? So that's what that you can instruct your API server where you want that particular pod to be running, right? Kubernetes master. That was the thing that you are saying explicitly, right? But what if the same way we are putting something called our labels and selector on that particular thing, right? Like if the same thing we need to put it for our something called nodes, right? Then we want to do it, okay, do it that way, right? So how you can do it, right? So for that, what is happening is we need to understand first taint and toleration, right? Let me take the uh, we have the toll tax on road, right? This analogy we will take to understand it, right? We have a highway, right? Any highway you can take, and we have this toll taxes, toll booth is coming, right? And there we have a multiple lanes. But in each side, either you are going or you are coming, right? like in your side, left and right, whatever, you will find a exception lane, right? Where only exempted cars can go, like ambulance or maybe some VIPs moving somewhere, right? Or maybe some ambulance van, school van or something, right? Only those particular cars which are exempted, they can go to that particular lane, right? Which they don't have that privilege, right? They don't have that exemption. They have to follow a default lane, right? Like wherever they want, they can just go and they just pass the toll booth, right? So similarly in taint and toleration also, what is happening is, taint is nothing. Taint is just a kind of, it's a kind of restrictions, right? Which we are putting on our thing, right? So taint basically will be applied to the node, which tells a Kubernetes, okay, if this is the taint, right? Like this is a kind of label you are putting, and toleration is something that which we add in the pod's specification, right? Which allow a pod to run on a particular node if they can tolerate that taint, right? The same thing, right? Only a car can be passed when they have the exemption. Then they can only use that particular specific privilege lane. Otherwise, they need to go a default lane, right? And any lane they can choose. That's what we can do, right? So taint is something that we are just putting some labels on our, where we are putting some labels on node. If I show you now, kubel get nodes dash dash show hyphen labels. Okay, BLS. Yeah, there was a typo. So as of now, you can see that there is no default. As of now, there is no default something that taint and toleration or maybe anything we have applied, right? It is something that you have, which is already up kind of putting from the your Kubernetes cluster. We don't put anything as of now, right? So taint we need to put on the uh, let me go to this. So here probably will be better to understand. Okay, let me close this. So it will be little wide. So taint is as specified above, which can handle the defined taint on node, right? It is a kind of restrictions or limitation which we can put on nodes, right? So this is something that the taint and toleration, right? It is nothing, it is just a key value pair to apply the taint, right? And this is the way that we can apply. What we can do is Kubernetes taint node, we can put the taint node name, and then we can need to specify any key value, right? And then we need to say that, okay, what is that taint effect, right? I think there is a multiple taint here. I think this will be the correct, yeah, key value and the taint effect. Now question is, what is taint effect, right? So taint effect is nothing. Taint effect is a kind of three types of taint effect we have in Kubernetes cluster. One is the no schedule. No schedule is something that no pods will be scheduled on that particular node, right? There will be no pod can be scheduled on that particular uh, node, right? If you put prefer no schedule, right? So what scheduler will try? Scheduler will try to avoid that node. If it is possible to accommodate something on other nodes which don't have this taint effect, right? So the your pod will be scheduled there, right? It will be kind of avoid situation, right? It will, at the end it will gonna avoid. If not, then probably due to some priority or something, at the end it will gonna schedule. No execute is something, no new pod will be scheduled. Whatever that you are running, that is fine, they are running, right? And existing pod will be evicted if they are not able to tolerate, right? So this is very important to understand. No schedule is something, if you put here, then no pod will be scheduled on that particular node. Whatever is running, fine, they will gonna run. Prefer no schedule is something, it's a kind of win-win situation. If scheduler will find, they will schedule on another node. If not, anyhow they have to schedule. The last one is the no execute, right? So no execute will be kind of, it will be gonna must check that tolt and toleration, right? Like taint and toleration, it will gonna check if they are not able to tolerate that taint, right? So those pods will be evicted from that node, and whatever the best node is available for those pod, they will be scheduled there, right? So that is how that we will see. Before I jump into all these no schedule and everything, let me show you one interesting fact. Here, what I mentioned is like you can explicitly set this something called node name where you want to node, right? But on the other hand, I was talking about the no schedule, right? Where you put the no schedule, that means that that particular pod will not gonna scheduled on that node, right? Let me show you one interesting fact here. If I'm gonna describe the node, which one? K8 master, and if I just search for word called taint. Now you can see that on this node, which is a control plane, there is a taint already applied called no schedule, right? So here this is the contradicting statement, right? Which you can say I was mentioning, because here I'm saying that no ports will be scheduled, right? And this is something it was already there, right? We haven't put this taint on this node. Later, what we have done is we have deployed a pod called Web5 on K5, K8 master node, right? So, how that is possible, right? This is possible because when you say the node name property in the pod, right? So, what we are doing is we are bypassing the scheduler, right? Whereas when the taint is there, right? Scheduler has to respect the taint, right? Whatever the taint effect you have applied, scheduler has to follow that. But in this case, scheduler was never in picture, so obviously API server directly deploy our server on pod on the Kubernetes master node, right? That was the thing. All right, now let's come to our this thing taint node. So for that, let me clear my screen. Just give a comment if you are not understanding this, right? Maybe I will try to answer your question again. What I have done is I have created a pod definition where I'm saying it will be defining, right? It will be kind of setting where we have something called this taint is applied, right? Where I'm saying the key is disk, right? Operator is equal to equal, value is SSD, and effect is no schedule, right? But before that, let me give you a scenario like why we put a taint, right? So taint is nothing, right? Taint is something like, let's say uh, you want to deploy a pod on a particular dedicated node, maybe where you have that GPU specific application, right? And in the entire cluster, only two nodes is there which can compatible or comfortably run that GPU workload, right? So there in that case, what you can do is you can put a particular key label on that node, and while deploying a GPU based application pod, you can put that toleration. So that pod can tolerate that taint and it will be going to that particular node, right? Now, or maybe to protect a critical system node, right, where you don't want to run some kind of random pod, right? Only some critical application should be running, right? That, or maybe a scenario like where you just want to isolate, right? The same scenario which we discussed with the namespace, where we are just running a dedicated resources. But in this case, if you want, you can just run your isolated at the node level also, right? That's what kind of use case we can say, right? So now let me put this command Kubernetes kubectl taint node. I would say K8 node 1. Okay. And I would say disk uh, colon. This is the key, right? This is the key. This is the value I am putting, right? And this is the kind of uh, taint effect. That's what we have learned, right? Let me go back. So what we have seen is kubectl taint node name. Then you need to put a key and the value and the taint effect, right? So taint effect is any of these three: no schedule, preferred schedule, and no execute, right? So this is something Uh, so here what it will happen is I haven't applied it. We will apply, but let's try to understand first. I am saying to the pod, right? You need to tolerate a particular taint. Which taint? You need to find a key where you will see a disk operator equal to is equal to SST, right? It can be a multiple operator here, not equal to in, right? Maybe you can refer the documentation for more operator details. Value must be SST and the taint effect will be the no schedule. Wherever it find, okay, this is something that I have, right? It will go and try to schedule on that particular node, right? But let me tell you one thing. There is no guarantee, right? With the taint and toleration, there is no guarantee that when I'm gonna schedule this pod will go to a Kubernetes node 1. Why? We are setting this taint at the node level, right? Whenever the scheduler tries to schedule some pod on this node, right, it will gonna check whether this taint can be tolerated by that particular node or not. If not, then obviously it will not gonna schedule on this, it will go a different node, right? But what if a first attempt of the scheduler will be to a different node, not this, right? Then there is no meant to be putting all these taint and toleration, right? So to overcome that, we have a next topic coming called node affinity, right? Where we are just sticking, okay, you need to follow only this node only, and then you can just find out the taint and toleration, whether you are able to tolerate that or not, right? So node affinity I will gonna discuss in the next video, but let's understand the taint and toleration, right? So it be win-win situation might be the pod is coming to the Kubernetes node 1, and if it is coming, it will gonna check the toleration status. If can tolerate, it will gonna schedule. If not, then it will go to the next pod, right? But there is no guarantee from the scheduler it will come to the node 1, right? But we will try. Okay, so now I will say first how many pods are running on node 1, so that it will try to attempt on the this one only. Okay, now I will gonna delete this some pod, delete pod, let's say web 1, okay, and web 2. Now let's see what is the situation. Okay, Kubernetes node 1, we have only one, and node 2, we have two, and master we have already running, right? I know this video is getting stretched, but that's what it is. Like we need to deep dive all these topics. Then only we'll be able to understand all these taint and toleration in very good manner, right? So yeah, just bear with me. Thank you. And okay, so that is fine. So what I have done is I need to go and first I need to set this something called this taint and toleration, right? Now it is saying that Kubernetes node 1 tainted, right? Like if I just want to show you, so this is the node 1, right? And node 1, we have something called, where it is, Kubernetes node 1, all this ISO, Kubernetes node 1. Okay, it is not showing here. So probably let me do one thing. Kubectl describe, okay? CRIBE node K8 node 1. If I go scroll up, so somewhere we have to be this thing. Yeah, you can see that taint, right? So it has a taint effect, right? Disk equal to SSD, and the effect is no schedule, right? Now let's see what is happening inside the pod now. You can see with the no schedule, right? It is a node 1, it was running and it's keep on running. Whereas if you would have applied no execute, right? So what it will gonna check is, it will gonna check the nginx is able to tolerate that taint. If not, then nginx would have been evicted from the node 1, and it will gonna schedule on any of the node which is available in the cluster, right? Now that's fine. But we have this something called taint, right? This port. Let's apply this kubectl create hyphen f and 14. It is created. Now let's see where it was created. And indeed, it has been created on the Kubernetes node 1 only because it was able to tolerate that taint, right? If I'm gonna describe this, right? Well, I'm not sure why it's running slow today. Kubectl describe pod web 1. Okay. Now you can see it has some toleration is been set. Uh, Here it is, right? So you can see that it has a toleration this set, right? And it will gonna do this stuff with this, right? We will discuss all this stuff, no execute and all this in when we discuss the no affinity, right? Where we have that particular kind of effect for the node affinity, right? But as of now, you can see that this was able to do it, right? And it was able to schedule on the web 1. Let me change this edit node k8 node 1. Okay. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna change the taint to no execute. It is done now. And let's see what is happening to the pod. You can see there is no nginx. And why it was not scheduled? Because it was there is no one who can take care of that because it was just deployed using a command line, right? That is why that nginx was gone. Why? Because it was not able to tolerate that taint which is set on the Kubernetes node 1, right? Now let's see if I am gonna create one more. Let's say I just name it one more. Okay. And if I am gonna do it kubectl create hyphen f 14, you can see that though it was able to tolerate that particular thing, right? But it never came to node 1, right? But web 1 is also gone, right? It haven't scheduled. Yeah, because that was kind of time it was running, right? It is saying that no new pod will be scheduled and existing pod will be evicted if they are not able to tolerate, right? So on which node we have done it? Let me check. I think yeah, it is node 1 only, right? And if I just say taint, so we have done it for taint 1 only. Yeah, it should be. Just a second. Kubectl describe node k8 node 1. If I grep for taint, so it is no execute and disk SSD. But at the time the pod web 1 was running on that, right? And it must be scheduled on this, right? So let's do one thing. Let's create one more time web 1. Okay, the reason is I'll tell you why. Because we are saying for this pod, right? It is a no schedule, but there we are saying a no execute. So effect was never set, never met, right? So let me change this. It must be execute. Okay. Now let's see what is happening. Come on. I have saved it, and we will gonna run kubectl create -f14. All right. So we are good. Let's create it and see what is happening now. It has created. Now, if we need to check the again that void command output, where is the command? Come on. Yes, here it is. So now you can see that web1 came to Kubernetes node 1. But that time when we do that, what was happening is, let me explain here why it was evicted. And it was never scheduled to a node 2 because there was no taint was set, right? So what is happening is, first we have this node 2, node 1, right? Earlier what we have done is we have put a taint called no schedule, and then at the time of no schedule, web1 pod was also pointing to the no schedule effect, and then we have done it. What happening is, it was coming to that no one only. But now we changed the effect to no schedule to no execute, but we never change the pod. Although this thing we never do in production environment, right? But I was just showing you like how it was gonna behaving if we change the taint effect, right? Because that is something that you can change it, right? You can control it, right? Like after setting it, if something like the way we did, right? We have changed that label, right? We have changed that label and selector, or we have changed that taint, right? Then our port will went away, right? That time we face our application down, right? But this thing can still be controlled using called node affinity, right? So node affinity will be gonna the next topic for our this series, right? So as of now, that was the taint and toleration, right? Everybody, nah. Anyways, so yeah, that was the reason like it was never scheduled on node 2 and it was evicted from the node 1, right? And yeah, that is something this taint and toleration, right? Because this is the concept in Kubernetes where you can control a pod placement using rules on node and permissions on pod, right? Because a rule we are creating on node is something called, we are saying okay, disk equal to SSD, and is will be the effect, right? And the permission we are giving to that our pod in the definition file. Okay, you need to follow this, right? So that's how that you can control it. So in the next video, we will look at node affinity, how it compare with the this taint and toleration, right? So yeah, that's it from the day, guys. I hope you liked my content, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe and share it this with others and preparing for the CK exam, right? So see you in the next video. Bye bye.